Act 1, the crime scene. It left no fingerprints, no broken glass, no forced entry. You know, the moment. It's late. The room's quiet. You open the feed, and there it is. A face you recognize. A life that looks easier, sharper, more assembled than yours. And then, the signal. A tightness in the chest, a small cold drop in the stomach. You close the app, open it again, close it. That wasn't admiration. That was the moment you turned against yourself. In my former life, I hunted criminals, men who forced locks, climbed through windows, took what was never theirs. But this case is different. This case has no suspect outside the room. The thief and the victim are the same person. His name was Nikolas. He came to me on a Tuesday, 36 years old, sharp suit, tired eyes. He didn't look like a man who'd been robbed. He looked like a man who'd been robbing himself for years. Tonight we open the file on envy, not the moral lecture version, not the self-help version. The investigation, what it actually is, how it works inside you, and why, if you don't interrogate it, it will do more damage than any criminal ever could. Act 2, the interrogation. Nikolas was a designer, talented, the kind of person whose work made other people stop and look. 3 years ago, a former classmate launched a studio. Within 18 months, it was everywhere. Awards, press, Instagram followers in the hundreds of thousands. Nikolas watched all of it. He watched from his apartment, from his desk, from the blue light of his phone at 1 a.m. And slowly, without deciding to, he stopped. Stopped pitching new clients, stopped finishing projects, stopped entering competitions he used to love. He told himself he was being realistic, that the market was saturated, that timing was everything. He was lying. The truth was simpler and harder. He had outsourced his sense of progress to someone else's timeline. Every time he saw the classmate's work, his own felt smaller. Not because it was, but because he had made it mean something about himself. If the classmate was rising, Nikolas must be falling. If the classmate was building, Nikolas must be standing still. This is the logic of envy, and it is always, always a logic error. Stoicism teaches something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You don't suffer because of what you see. You suffer because of what you conclude. When Nikolas scrolled past that post at 1 a.m., nothing was taken from him. No resource was depleted. No opportunity was closed. His talent didn't shrink. His time didn't shorten. What changed was his interpretation. He looked at a finished product, a polished golden king on the board, and forgot the 100 losing moves that built it. The failed pitches, the rejected proposals. The nights when that classmate also sat alone, also unsure, also afraid. Envy is not emotion, it is a judgment, a flawed one. You are comparing your unedited reality, the drafts, the doubts, the 1 a.m. versions, to someone else's final frame, their highlight reel, their curated outcome. That comparison was never fair. It was never meant to be, and you built it yourself. Let's be precise. You didn't stop because you couldn't continue. You stopped because continuing felt worse than comparing. Comparing is painless, building is not. So you chose the painless option and called it being realistic. Act 3, the deeper case. But there's a deeper case inside the case, and Nikolas, to his credit, eventually saw it. It wasn't really about the classmate. It was never about the classmate. It was about time. Existentialism confronts us with something we spend enormous energy avoiding. We are finite. There are only so many years in which to build, to create, to become. And when we watch someone else use their years well, when we see proof that it's possible, we feel two things simultaneously: inspiration and terror. The terror is this: if he could do it and I haven't, what does that say about how I've used my time? That question is the real case. Not why is he successful, but why have I stopped? Not what does he have, but what have I abandoned? Epictetus called it a jurisdiction error. You are investing your energy, your most finite, irreplaceable resource, outside your domain of control. Another man's success is not inside your jurisdiction. It never was. What he built, what he earned, what he became, none of it can be touched from where you stand. But your own work is entirely within your jurisdiction. Your own thinking, your own discipline, your own next move. Nikolas had left his house unattended, not because someone broke in, because he walked out himself and stood at a neighbor's window, watching a life he hadn't built, growing more certain by the day that he never could. This is what envy does in its advanced stages. It doesn't just slow you down, it rewrites your story retroactively. Suddenly, your past choices feel like evidence of permanent limitation. Your current work feels inadequate before it's finished. Your future feels foreclosed, not by circumstance but by comparison. You become a secondary character in someone else's noir film, watching from the alley while the lead walks under the streetlights. At this point, envy is no longer a feeling. It's a function. It keeps you busy. Busy enough to avoid the one question you're most afraid of. What would happen if you actually tried, and it still wasn't enough? As long as you're focused on them, you don't have to confront yourself. And that is the real theft. Not of success, but of action. And the cruelest part? No one put you there. You walked into the alley yourself? Act 4, the Stoic verdict. Nikolas came to me 3 months after the worst of it. He hadn't worked in 6 weeks. Not really. He'd opened files, stared at them, closed them. He said, "I don't know what's wrong with me." That sentence appears in almost every case. Different words, same meaning. I stopped, and I don't know why. I told him, "Nothing is wrong with you. You made a logical error, and logical errors can be corrected. First, name what you're actually reacting to." Nikolas thought he was reacting to his classmate's success. He wasn't. He was reacting to the gap. The distance between where he was and where he believed he should be by now. That gap is not a verdict. That gap is information. It tells you what still matters to you, what you haven't given up on, even when you told yourself you had. Second, interrogate the envy precisely. Ask one question. What specifically am I reacting to? Is it the result, the recognition, the money, the visibility? Or is it the discipline that produced it, the daily work, the consistency, the refusal to stop? These are not the same thing. If it's the result, the envy will never resolve. Results are infinite. There will always be someone with more recognition, more money, more visibility. You will spend your entire life looking through windows. But if it's the discipline, then the case is clear. You don't need what they have, you need what they did. And that is something entirely within your jurisdiction. Third, return to your own operation. Nikolas went home that night and opened a file he hadn't touched in 2 months. He didn't work for hours. He worked for 20 minutes. The next day, 25. The day after, 40. Not because he'd solved the envy, not because the classmate had disappeared from his feed, but because he'd stopped waiting for the envy to resolve before he started building. He stopped being a witness to other lives. He became the lead investigator of his own. Act 5, the cleanup. The verdict is not emotional. It is not comforting. It is precise. Envy is a signal, not a sentence. Interrogate it. 3 moves. 1. Name it. Say it plainly to yourself. I am envious of this person for this specific thing. No metaphors, no softening. Name the crime clearly. 2. Ask what it's actually about. Is it the result or the discipline? Is it about them Or about the version of yourself you've been postponing? What stopped? When? Why? 3. Return to your own board. Close the window, literally and figuratively. Open your own file. Move one piece, not 10, one. The board doesn't reset overnight, but it moves when you move it. Clean the glass, sharpen the logic. Put the pieces back in play. Nikolas called me 6 months later, not to report a breakthrough, not to announce a success, just to say he was working again. That was enough. In the dark streets of the soul, the only light that doesn't flicker is the one you maintain yourself. Stop observing, stop comparing, begin. Maintain order, build your own case.